about Atiim, just really quickly, we're software for OKRs for goal setting. This is not a software presentation, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but that's what we are and that's what we do. And of course, we'll talk about OKRs and alignment at your company. So on our agenda, we'll talk about what are OKRs. I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing this term. It's been pretty popular and made even more popular by Google. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why high-performing organizations and teams use OKRs, how to launch them successfully, how OKRs make your managers more effective. And that's a really big leverage for all of HR, for all of people ops, is making your employees perform better by first enabling your managers to be more effective as managers, and lots more. So the first section is about OKRs. What exactly are they? I'm guessing a lot of you came here because you probably already heard about OKRs, but just to be more precise and specific, it's a management approach or methodology. Management meaning literally it's used for managing people. It's not a project management. It's not any other management than people management approach. And it's used to align everyone at your company or your team, focus everyone's effort on what really matters, and make progress measurable, meaning that a lot of progress today is not very measurable. OKRs or any goal setting in general makes progress at your company or on your team much more measurable, observable, so that you can ultimately achieve your top corporate objectives and even accelerate your business performance and results. There was a book that was released this year by a famous venture capitalist investor named John Doerr. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He's well known for investing into Google before Google was Google, right? It was just two gentlemen out of Stanford's computer science program. He also invested in Amazon and a number of other world-class companies. He's known for creating over 300,000 jobs through his investments. And, bottom line is John Doerr knows how to build very successful companies. And he knows the key recipes that these successful executives and entrepreneurs and founders and people managers have applied to make their companies really successful. And the one key ingredient is OKRs. He writes a whole book about them with a subtitle of How Google, Bono, and the Gates Foundation Rocked the World with OKRs. Pretty cool subtitle. And it's a great, great book. We actually send it to all of our customers. Larry Page said that I wish I had this book 19 years ago when we founded Google. Pretty amazing. And actually, Google was introduced to OKRs without the details that are spelled out in this book. And they used it to create alignment throughout the entire organization as they rapidly grew. And you can imagine it was very hard if you didn't have like a more formal alignment. It created a lot of focus on what really mattered to the company instead of diluting the effort. And you may know of other books that talk about objectives and goal setting, particularly, the book called Practice of Management by Peter Drucker. He's well known and regarded as the dean of modern business management. He wrote about MBOs. He invented the concept of MBOs, management by objectives. You've heard about it. Andrew Grove was a very popular executive. He ran Intel, and he's still, regarded as one of the best CEOs in technology space, even though he passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But he wrote a book, High Output Management, and talked there about Intel MBOs. And Intel MBOs were basically taking Peter Drucker's concept of how to do management by objective at your company and turned them into OKRs. He actually called them Intel MBOs, but the way he wrote them out, as John Doerr points out in his book, is he would have like a big objective and what are the key results you want to achieve on your way to achieving that objective. And John Doerr made OKRs more, formal of a practice in his book, Measure What Matters. So these are the books that you'll probably have heard of. Bill Gates read the book and he wrote a summary of it or reviewed it, and he said he called it "Management Tips from a Brilliant Business Leader." Now, if Bill Gates says that, it's definitely it means something, right? Bill Gates really knows what he's talking about. He built one of the biggest and fastest growing companies in the world over the past several decades. So, what exactly are the benefits of OKRs? So John Doerr talks about the four big superpowers of OKRs, and the first one is focus. And I, took this out verbatim from his book so that I can sort of talk to it. But focus is easy, right? You focus on the things that truly matter. So when you write out explicitly your objectives, and by the way, OKRs, think of them as just goals, objectives, right? The acronym may be kind of a perception that it's something complicated or new and different. These OKRs are just a variant of the classic objectives with a couple of additional tips and criteria to make them better and more fitting to the modern world. But overall, any goals will create focus, right? So when you write out even personal goals, never mind business or team or company goals, it makes you focus on those things, right? It's a kind of a natural byproduct of writing them out explicitly. Another one is alignment, because when you write out top corporate objectives in any teams or departments or business units, explicitly write out their objectives for the quarter or for the year. They always do it in the context of and in light of the big corporate objectives, which by design creates alignment. Right? You're aligned because your objectives are directly supposed to impact and work in the context of what the company really needs. Another one is tracking, right? So when you don't write out objectives, you're kind of just doing a lot of busy work. You're a busy bee doing a lot of activities. Tracking activities in a task tracking tools, right? Any to-do list, while extremely helpful, it's not a goal. It's just something you do, right? And we'll talk about the differences between tasks and projects and goals. There are fine differences. But when you write out goals, they're more measurable. They're long-term, right? Quarterly or annually. They're not like something you do in an hour, like a task. And you can track progress towards those goals. And stretch is the fourth superpower, and it just means that you can accelerate your results by setting ambitious objectives that otherwise you wouldn't be paying attention to, sort of the aspirational nature of the objective that you write out, because you'd just be doing your busy bee kind of work. But when you write out stretch, goals, you can in many cases achieve them. So let me define OKRs more specifically for you. So the fine differences are that, unlike an MBO, which you just write out as simply like, a typical, sentence with a measurable, with a quantifiable metric there, and that's just slightly like they vary just a little bit. The objective is the big what. What is it that you want to accomplish? It's a statement, kind of like a headline. Is the direction, where do you, what is it that, where are you going, right? And the key result is the measurable and very specific, verifiable statement. We'll talk more about that, but generally, the formula is we want to, and then you state the objective. This is John Doerr's formula. And then you say, as measured by this set of key results. And you list out the key results. Just a random example could be, we want to expand our company globally. And one key result could be, additional 20 million or 50 million or 100 million or $1 billion in revenue, Asia Pacific region, and an additional $1 billion in revenue or million in revenue, whatever it is for your team or department or company, additional, X million from, European, Eastern Europe or Middle East and Africa or something, right? So then you're kind of expanding globally, right? Beyond maybe the confines of, wherever your country is. Another key result, recruit additional, 50 new team members in those countries, right? So as you can see, the big objective is, expanding globally, and the key result is more measurable and specific. So let's define and discern between, what is an activity focused item like a task or a project versus a goal, which is not about activities. It's about the achievement of results, outcomes. So task is just some, single thing that you do, right? It's to do. Typically one person, you'll do it. Again, task is activity based. It's activity focused. It's something you do. A project is an initiative done by one or more people. Requires multiple tasks. Many tasks could take a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, right? But a goal is something completely different and at a whole different level, higher and above tasks and projects. That's actually what is the desired outcome in the future that you want to achieve by doing a lot of tasks or projects. It's not activity focused. It's not just something you do. It's not an activity. It's the result that you want to achieve, right? So you see the fine nuanced difference, and the wording there makes all the difference. So John Doerr in his book, I mean, that book is fantastic. We're actually, just to let you know, we're releasing a book summary. We may even put it on Amazon. I'd hate to charge for it, but we may just do it because it's that good. And we put a lot of effort into it. And at the end, I'll let you know how you can sign up to ultimately receive that book summary. But in any case, when you read that book, he says everybody does OKRs. One of the essential qualities is everybody does them. Everybody. And these are words from his book. Many early adopters were from the tech world, but companies from other industries like BMW, Anheuser-Busch, obviously beer, Samsung, Disney, they all use OKRs. Regardless of the size of your company or its life stage, everybody does them. And he says in sum, objectives and key results are a potent, proven force for operating excellence for Google. So why not for you? Right? So he uses Google as this great example. I mean, they became a gigantic and highly successful company using OKRs. By the way, if you like watching TED Talks on YouTube or on TED's own website, John Doerr had a recent TED Talk. It was about 11, 12 minutes. It was very interesting. He even had Bono from U2 on there. I think it was a recorded video. I don't think it was live, but talking about using OKRs. Pretty cool, right? For his nonprofit organization, it's obviously managed by professional managers. So why do high-performing organizations use OKRs? Well, as you know, the performance of your company is directly linked to the performance of your people. That's a no-brainer. There are also well-researched statistics about when you don't have objectives and therefore do not have alignment that is clear, and people are not clear on what their objectives are, there's a ton of cost. And I'm sorry for this font issue here. I don't know what happened, but there's a huge cost to the company, and what CEOs cite as one of the top reasons that failure and problems in their organizations are executing their strategy. PwC talks about how most of the companies, over 80%, don't use their workforce to its full potential. Corporate executive board, which is now part of Gartner research, they say 50% of average workforce time is wasted on unproductive work. All these issues are basically compounded when you don't have clear objectives. GALLUP talks about employees don't really know what's expected of them, and therefore that directly impacts employee engagement. And John Doerr actually talks in his book about, one of the biggest factors, if not the biggest, I forgot the exact wording there, according to research done by Deloitte, I think, in terms of what impacts employee engagement the most out of multiple factors. And I think he was saying, setting clear objectives, giving employees clarity and how what they're doing connects directly to the corporate mission. And that's done through objectives, through OKRs. They set objectives for employees that are directly aligned and contribute to the company's top objectives, which is part of the mission. And all these statistics, really trickle down into the following: is that your employees, your workforce, that's 70% of your annual spending on your income statement. So if you're spending 70%, 70 cents on every dollar on your workforce, you might as well make sure that they're very clear about their objectives, and their employee engagement factor is enhanced by setting that clarity, which OKRs do extremely well and are the best tool for that. Google, on their website, they created a special website called Rework regarding work at Google, based on a lot of research and things they do at Google to make the company operate better. And they talked about how, OKRs, and how research shows that performance is higher at your company when people are committed to their goals. Now, I know I'm talking to a lot of people operations and HR members and leaders on this webinar, and obviously HR is human resources. Is the function that unlocks the value of your people at your company. Excuse me, in many ways, to improve the company's performance, to improve outcomes for the company. And it's kind of an HR, value add, and probably the primary one to apply the best practices to make your people operate far, to unlock that value of your people at your company that impact the performance and results at your company. And Google has shared this based on their research and what has really worked well through all the data crunching they've done. And we'll talk a little bit later about how Google ran this very interesting experiment. Google is all about data. Everything they do is all data. They ran this experiment about basically very interesting one called Project Oxygen, and questioning whether you need managers. And they ran this controlled sort of experiment of what would happen if they got rid of all the managers and let just people manage themselves. And they have data on that, and it's pretty interesting, right? So Google figured out that OKRs, as part of their research, significantly improves this whole ability to unlock value of your employees. So Google posted a video about how they do it. It's a couple of years old, and it's already been almost 650,000 views. I think it's over 630 at this point. And this is viewed, this is about an hour and a half long, and it's viewed primarily by, people managers, senior executives, middle managers, general managers, frontline managers. Video about how Google uses objectives to manage their people is typically not viewed by, regular, consumers, right? It's not a topic of interest to them. So getting 600 people or managers, and there's not that many managers, there's like one manager for every 10 employees, right? Getting 600,000+ of those to watch a video like that is very hard in a couple of years. It's unusual. It's pretty darn viral. Not many videos get more than just a few hundred views. So it's obviously a very important topic and very useful approach to management. This is a list of companies, while we're still finishing up the section on high-performing companies using OKRs. This is a list, and here, obviously you see more companies outside of technology space where OKRs began. Financial companies, General Electric, Gap, a couple of government organizations, and even government agencies, and even state, different states and counties have been using OKRs, and we've helped a number of them. Pretty interesting. Here's more. It's a big list, and it keeps expanding very rapidly. This is just less than 1% of the companies out there, obviously, using OKRs. So let's talk now about how to launch OKRs easily and successfully. So if your CEO at your company is working with you in people operations or HR, implement OKRs, and I think that's happening to a lot of you. We keep getting statistics. It's just blowing up tremendously right now. We just spoke to a company today. They have 10,000 employees, and the CEO basically asked every manager to buy this book, Measure What Matters, because they're going to be implementing OKRs starting January 1 next year. Pretty amazing, right? And they're rushing it. So OKRs, it's an easy goal-setting system. Remember, we talked about OKRs are rooted in management by objectives, really came from that. They're simple. They're transparent. With OKRs, you have regular check-ins. They're quarterly. They're not annual, because we don't work on a once-a-year business cycle anymore, as you all know. And there's this whole thing about alignment and cascading objectives Some people like to call them waterfalling, whatever, but it all means the same thing, where there is interconnection and directional relationship where, objectives somewhere, even at the bottom of the company are not done outside of the context of what truly matters to the company at the top. Why do CEOs work with HR to implement OKRs? We already talked about the 4 superpowers that John Doerr introduced. But overarchingly, it's clear communication of the top organizational goals to everyone. It helps connect everyone's goals to the top of the company's goals. It improves employees' focus on what truly matters. It's better agility due to frequent cycles, right? So companies can turn things around faster because you're not checking on your goal once a year. It drives alignment across the company and removes silos, increases transparency because everybody knows what's important to the company and who's on. People are not paying attention to what activities or tasks you're working on, but they can clearly see goals. OKRs are supposed to be transparent. So one of the key tips a lot of HR leaders share, as best practices for implementing OKRs is that HR must allow managers to localize goal setting process on their teams. What I mean by that is that, historically, sort of in a legacy goal setting approach, there are, and I speak about this from a software perspective, there are, software applications that are really built for HR, and they kind of make the managers log in, put in once a year annual goal for each employee. And managers do that, and they put it in there, and then they never check on it again until the end of the year. We've seen the statistics behind it. It's been, unfortunately a problem because that doesn't really work. It doesn't really do anything. It's kind of okay for compliance purposes, but HR is not about compliance. HR is about unlocking value. So if you localize this with managers, they will, quote unquote, own this process. And, a lot of modern software, for example, our software at Atiim, it's made in such a way that it's supported, administered, and embraced by HR on behalf of the company. But managers can be invited in and kind of run the weekly check-ins for 5 minutes every 5 days, create goals for their employees. If you read the book from John Doerr, there's a concept of conversations, feedback, and recognition, CFR, and do that. One of the key things that are different about OKRs, as Andy Grove said, is the keys to set and check in on the goals frequently. So don't do it once a year. We talked about it. So that's one of the key factors of successful implementation of OKRs that HR leaders support to make sure that the rollout of OKRs works really well. From GALLUP, there are statistics that when you combine goals with feedback, and when I say feedback, I actually mean CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition, which can be summarized probably with feedback. But John Doerr talks about how it's important that when you set goals that you give people feedback on their progress, you give them recognition on their wins, you have conversations around what they're doing to achieve their goals, and that magnifies and amplifies the results of goal attainment. 94% of employees in recent research say they prefer that managers do regular check-ins. And check-ins are not like in vacuum. Check-ins are with respect to your progress on objectives, right? You can't just check in on vacuum. What are you checking in on? Just like how things are going and how people are doing? Well, that's great, and that's all dandy, but if you're running a business, you need to have objectives, and you got to check in on the progress, measurable, explicit, tangible progress. And listen, it's just, I think of it as really 5 minutes every 5 days, right? But, it's flexible. There's no right or wrong. I think taking just 5 minutes per week during the 5 working days is nothing, right? It's something, that an employee, like in our software, it enables like these beautiful forms. You can quickly, check off like how you're doing this week, how things are going on the goals, with notifications and automation. But even if you're doing a check-in by email and sending a quick 5-minute update to your manager on, how you're doing on your objectives, any bottlenecks or obstacles, any small wins that are, good that you feel good about. And many companies prefer to do it every 2 weeks, and they take longer than just 5 minutes. We have some bigger customers, public companies that prefer to do it once a month. But I think most of them have transitioned from once a month or every 2 weeks to just weekly 5-minute quick update. I mean, you manage people as a manager for 5 days, 40 plus whatever hours. People should be able to find 5 minutes to give an update to the manager, and the manager should have 5 minutes per person to glance at the update and have a context of how things are going and provide some feedback and recognition. No brainer. When you have objectives, by the way, this is also a screenshot of out of our product. Actually, we just today released a brand new menu, so we should update this on the left. It's much simpler. But so, you can start every meeting as a manager with your team members that's much more objective and substantive, much more structured. How's your progress in your OKRs? How's the progress? Do you think you're on track overall? Any small wins? You can also identify problem areas early if you have objectives, right? If you use OKRs, you can really see early on when you're in the red, when you're at risk. And by the way, I know a lot of you are like, well, how do you update this? How do you create goals? I mean, that's beyond the scope of the webinar, but it's all, developed and, done to be easy and simple. But, don't want to waste too much time explaining how you click to create a goal and how you check in on it and how you update it. I mean, it's all done very easily in software, and, we obviously train people and show them really easy peasy. But at the very high level, once they're updated, and if you update them 5 minutes per week, every 5 days, you'll know when things are not on track. If you're supposed to make 100 widgets and you are halfway into the quarter, but you only made 10 out of 100 widgets, so you're 50% into the quarter, but you're only 10% done with your objective, you are really behind. You're at risk, right? Your objective is at risk. So that early on, you can see the early trending with charts and data on the screen, and you can help people turn the ship around before it's too late, before it blows up and snowballs into something you cannot manage anymore. It's a big problem. And that's a problem for many companies that don't set objectives. That's the problem. Just people doing a lot of busy activities doesn't mean that your managers at your company or your CEO can clearly see whether you're on track or not. Also, with objectives, you can do cross-functional alignment, right? Connect an objective from one department to a different hierarchy in the team. I don't know, for example, a product marketing person helping the product team launch a new product and put together some information and collateral and blog posts and articles on the website, or maybe some marketing folks generating leads for their sales team. You can create cross-functional alignment in objectives, and it reduces silos. It does some amazing things for teamwork. And even in our product, we have a concept called social goals, where you can get social, right? Like you can praise someone's progress in the goals that are linked to your goals or that you both are working together on. Pretty cool stuff. On questions linking OKRs to compensation, I wanted to cover this because a lot of HR leaders ask about this a lot. Like any goals, nothing has changed, right? If you go back to the best practices even 20 years ago, it's always been said that the best outcome is when you separate the conversation about compensation away from purely being based on goals, meaning that it's done in a separate meeting so that it's not confused with being directly and completely and entirely a function of your goal attainment. And your goal attainment is just one of multiple factors. So, this is not a webinar about compensation and all that. I'm sure there's more detail to it that is covered on other webinars with HCI, but the main point is that, you take into account other things. Like as a random example, maybe the goal was set too aggressively, and that becomes obvious, and it's only fair. You don't take the goal attainment into consideration, or fully. Or there are other things, someone who attained all their goals, but they're a really bad team player. Well, sorry, that's not good enough to attain on your goals, right? When you're hurting the team. So there are multiple factors that should affect someone's compensation. Of course, it's contextual, depends on your culture, company, etc. But that's really what John Doerr is saying. When you are launching OKRs at your company, there are three keys to success. One is use your discretion. Second one is common sense, and common sense is not so common. So make it common at your company by using common sense, right? If something doesn't make sense, or you're having the entire company set OKRs, and not everybody has been trained, well, pause, right? And walk before you run. A lot of companies try to make it perfect and wordsmith their OK. We actually train our customers when we onboard them. We give them full training. It's all inclusive. And we teach them on OKRs, and we explain a lot of these things in granular detail to make sure our customers implement it successfully. But overarchingly, if you use discretion, common sense, and don't try to do too much and don't try to boil the ocean, you should be fine. So how do OKRs make your managers effective? And look, why am I talking about managers here? Because your managers, as I said earlier, are a key lever from HR perspective, or from perspective of any company CEO, that the easiest and simplest way to improve results across your company and to unlock value of your people is to start with people managers, right? That's your key lever. If your managers are well trained and are doing their job well and are effective as managers, you are 80% there. But employees were surveyed or polled by Harvard Business Review and Harris Poll a couple of years ago. It was 2016, 2015. And they all complained on average that, the first couple of bars here, not recognizing employee achievements, of course, right? And by the way, if you're not setting objectives, what can you possibly recognize if you don't really know objectively what results and performance people are achieving in a measurable way? Not getting clear directions, that's objectives for you. If you're just telling people to do something, that's not direction. Setting objectives is direction, right? Clarity on the results you want people to achieve without micromanaging them, which is what happens when people use a lot of task tracking tools. It's about tasks, not about quarterly or annual objectives, right? That they're being coached on to help achieve. So these are real issues that people complain about, and that OKRs very much solve. And Google, actually questioned, given all the problems with managers, do managers even matter? So there's actually a $14 Harvard case study you can purchase about this Project Oxygen that Google ran, and it's actually really interesting. But I'll save you the money and give you some summary, some takeaways in a nutshell. So Google did identify. They came to a conclusion that they wrote in their website that, research shows, not just like we think, but they did research, and it shows that managers do matter. They can have a significant impact on business outcomes and employee engagement, right? But many organizations do not adequately select or develop their managers and miss a great opportunity for business advancement. They wrote that managers matter a lot here. And the original study was done in 2002. They said in 2002, Google ran an uncontrolled experiment by simply getting rid of all managers, right? It's pretty interesting, right? Real thing. And they say at the top in the sub-headline, they do matter a lot and have a huge impact on employee performance. Huge, right? This is written by Google. Support your people by sharing what makes a great manager, right? And they tell you what makes a great manager from this research. So let's look into that. By the way, Inc. magazine wrote about it. Lessons from Google's failed quest to run a business without managers. New York Times wrote about it. Google's quest to build a better boss. So they realize managers do matter, but how do you make them effective? How do you make managers good? So the key takeaways, and there are more bullet points there. There are about 10 to 12 key items there, but the ones relevant here are the following: is that best managers, they create clear strategy for the team. By the way, clear strategy, that's setting objectives. That's your strategy. That's basically objectives. OKRs are what boils down your strategy into digestible, palatable couple of objectives, OKRs. A manager is a good communicator. They communicate effectively like the CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition, from that book by John Doerr. They don't micromanage, meaning that they don't emphasize doing tasks. They don't look at your to-do list, right? They set clear objectives and help coach you regularly. 5 minutes every 5 days, check in on how you're doing. How can I help you as your manager? How do I support you to get there? They help discuss performance. Performance on what? It's not performance in vacuum. When you don't have objectives, what kind of performance can you possibly be discussing? It makes zero sense. People talk a lot about performance, but don't actually set objectives. That's laughable. They're results oriented. That's right. Not task oriented, not activity oriented, not oriented on projects. They're oriented on objectives. Objectives are about results, outcomes, measurable results. And they're a good coach, right? There was a book written by the folks who were at Gallup called 12 Elements of Great Managing. What were their takeaways there? And they did 10 million interviews, right? They're not like Google. They didn't suspend managers, but they said the great manager connects the job to the organization's mission. That's done through objectives, OKRs, right? Set your objectives and how they connect to the top corporate objectives. They set clear direction, what is expected. Again, that's all about objectives. Discusses progress. Again, progress not in vacuum. Progress with respect to your objectives. Recognize you for good work. Well, no wonder. CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition. They enable learning and growth. Absolutely. When you're not achieving your objectives, you can learn better, etc. McKinsey and Company. Everybody knows McKinsey, right? They're a leading consultant. Decoding leadership paper. What really matters? Number one, clarify objectives, rewards, consequences. Develop people. That's like coaching on your progress. Giving praise. That's recognition. Remember, CFRs, conversation, feedback, recognition. Finally, strong results orientation. Great. Again, we go back to OKRs. Objectives. They're about results, not about activity, not about being a busy bee. So what are the consistent and repeating principles here through all of these? From Google to Gallup, the 12 elements of great managing from the folks who were at Gallup, from McKinsey. What are the principles? Well, we call them the life cycle of effective management. It's basically set agile goals, OKRs. Progress check-ins. For every 5 days, you do a quick 5-minute per person. Feedback, recognition, and then at the end of it all, once the goals were set and checked in on and feedback provided, recognition made, and done for a couple of quarters, then you can do a performance review snapshot. So not the old school performance review that everybody hates, which is isolated from setting OKRs, isolated from regular check-ins, isolated from regular feedback, isolated from recognition given throughout time, in specifically with respect to the achievement on objectives. Those were the old school legacy outdated performance reviews. But a performance review snapshot done within the life cycle of this effective management is perfectly fine. That's the right way to do it. Meaning that do performance reviews and appraisals. They're fine as long as you set objectives and did regular check-ins first. Jack Welch said, before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. Right? But when you become a leader, success is all about growing others. You do that through this life cycle of effective management, through the best practices that Google and McKinsey and Gallup shared. Deloitte did this global human capital trends research this year, 2018. And they said that the first thing in managing your human capital, your people, is first and foremost, set your OKR goals. This is the big popular thing right now for human resources, for those folks who unlock value of employees and enable your managers, all managers across the entire company, to be much more effective, right? Remember, performance management in HR, it's not purely about performance reviews or appraisals. That's not really part of the definition here. What is performance management? Well, first and foremost, in the definition of performance management is that first bullet point: establish measurable goals, objectives for employees. That is the tip of the spear. You can't have performance management. It cannot be defined without first setting objectives or OKRs, right? So when HR helps the company do performance management, it's very important to remember that if you have managers set the objectives first and foremost, and your CEO should know this, right? But if you're not doing that, you don't have performance management. You may have something else, whatever it is, maybe some form of just generic performance appraisal process, but that's not performance management. At the end of the day, as you see bolded at the bottom, most importantly, Deloitte defines that performance management is management that's embraced, supported, helped with by HR teams or people ops teams. But it's not something that people ops teams do in and of itself. They enable your managers, executive managers, general managers, middle managers, frontline managers, any kind of managers who manage people, to do performance management effectively, by first and foremost setting goals. So if you're looking to do goals in a modern way, doing objectives and key results, doing it like, over here I showed you, Deloitte said that the biggest trend right now in 2018 is all the HR leaders transitioning their companies to this modern best practice goal setting system, OKRs. If you are doing this, then you are helping do performance management correctly. You are enabling your your CEO and the executive team to implement the best practice for enabling the best you can enable for your employees at your company to perform better, to unlock the best value out of your people so it helps your company. You are helping your managers become more effective, better managers. If you're implementing OKRs and beginning to do so, you're enabling your employees to perform better with that better clarity, with that better recognition, which is an integral part of the objectives and key results implementation process. Remember those statistics done by Harvard Business Review on what employees complain about most? You are enabling to eliminate those problems that employees are complaining about. You're enabling the improvement of employee engagement at your company by creating clarity of direction for all the employees. You're enabling your managers to be more effective managers, to do the key best practices that Google and McKinsey and Gallup said makes managers better bosses, right? You're enabling all of that by beginning to implement OKRs, which include all of these key things that we talked about throughout this entire presentation. So moving on, I think I want to just kind of offer you a couple of free gifts, and I promised you that, we're doing that book summary. It's, we're also offering a free OKR consultation about how to implement it. It's not a product demo. It's truly an OKR consultation in itself. With any question goes, you can ask any questions specific to your company, help you set some OKRs. But, we're offering that if anybody wants to see a demo of our product, we will give you those things for free, including the summary and the consultation afterwards. Value add to you. But you just have to email us with the word "hi" in the subject line, and send it to cdemo@Atiim. Put your name, contact info, phone number, etc., email, and we will follow up, schedule a demo of the product, and in return give you back, consultation or the book summary, whatever it is that you want. So with that, I'd like to take questions. Any questions, ask me anything, and of course I need help from HCI I hope there are some really hard questions. Please go ahead and ask. Do we have any?
Zorian, this is Mary Fran, and we're waiting for our audience to weigh in with their questions, but there are a few here that we can start asking. Let me just take a look. We want to know one member of the audience asks, what are some of the most important differences between setting an OKR as opposed to some other methodology? What is something that separates OKRs from, say, something like, I don't know, like a lean
MBOs.
process or agile process in terms of how you set up
Well,
and define
lean
an
process
objective?
and agile is completely entirely different. Right. So lean, agile, and all that stuff. That's entirely different. That's apples and oranges. But when it comes to pure goal setting systems, there are systems like MBOs, management by objectives. There are SMART goals, etc. So, and then there's something that people confuse with goals called KPIs, key performance indicators. So, MBOs. Let's start with MBOs. Management by objectives, they were invented in the 50s or 60s by Peter Drucker. They were all about kind of like this annual goal setting. Well, we're not on the once-a-year business cycle anymore. MBOs were also far more about the manager giving it like a directive to the employee. And basically, it's not about any directives anymore. And it's not about a manager. And it's not about being private between a manager and employee. There's supposed to be transparent objectives that anybody in the company or your team members can see. And it's not about a manager directing the employee. It's called, bidirectional, meaning the manager can come and say, listen, this is what we need to achieve for the company or for our business unit. So here's my guidance on what we need from you, but please come back to me with your ideas on how you would do it and like what the goal should be. And believe it or not, that works really well. Typically, people think, oh, my God, but the employee will come back with a very light, easy goal. No, that really doesn't happen much at all, actually, in research. But it does give the employees the ownership sense, which is extremely valuable. So the key differences with transparency, alignment is another one. It's not about once a year. It's quarterly, and it's all about regular check-ins, 5 minutes every 5 days. So that's a big difference with MBOs. Versus SMART goals. Well, SMART is just like an acronym. It just defines what, people think it's a system, but it's not. SMART just means that when you write out your goal, it should be specific, measurable, ambitious, relevant, time-based. Sure, but that's what OKRs are. They're all of those. They're very smart. They're brilliant. So SMART is not a system. It's just an acronym for how to write out your goals. Another one people ask about is KPIs. Well, key performance indicators, they're not goals. They're not about alignment. They're not about transparency. They're just about tracking retrospectively. Retro means backwards, and spective means spectively is about looking, right? It's specerates, Latin for eyes, I think, or looking. It's just looking backwards. But goals are all about what you want to achieve going forward. KPIs are basically looking back at they're indicators of performance up till now, quarter to date or week to date. So they're very different things. And by the way, a lot of things you would use as KPIs are, for example, KPI could be your, profit margin for your company. Some very big, KPI. Well, you can set a profit margin as a resulting objective as a OKR. It will be in a key result for the end of the quarter, for the end of this year. So they're not mutually exclusive. It's just, think of OKRs as something that could be a KPI, but set forward in a forward-looking manner. Does that help? Did I answer that question?
I think that's
Any follow-up on that?
I think that's very informative for our audience, Zorian. And I know they have other really engaging questions. A person, ND, submitted their initials, but ND wants to know if you can talk a little bit more about setting goals in those first 90 days. And they have a follow-up question to that, but I'll let you start.
Could you say that again? The ideas for setting goals in the first 90 days?
Yes.
Would you repeat that?
Yes.
Ideas in which way?
Well, they would like to know if you can talk about setting goals in those first 90 days. And I'll give you the follow-up response now. They state that a typical response from managers about cascading goals is that they don't know what senior leadership's goals are. So is there a workaround?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So if the senior leadership team has not first and foremost set corporate objectives, it's definitely the case that you want your senior leadership to clearly communicate top corporate objectives for the year and for the quarter. That's a no-brainer, right? So if you're a leader in HR, I think for sure you may want to go to the CEO and say, look, people are looking for that, and it's important for us, right? Give them a gentle nudge. Because between you and me, that's not very good, right? I don't want to criticize any senior leadership, but this happens often enough. And that goes back to what employees complain about in that Harvard Business Review research project, that they're not getting clear direction. That has to do not just with frontline managers or first kind of first level managers at the bottom of your organization, but also with the senior leadership, right? So, but in the case that they didn't, and if they refuse to, which most of them will not if you tell them, but if they are completely reluctant and they won't do it, as unlikely as it is, what you can do is basically have employees consider, obviously the company wants to grow. Obviously the company, for them, it's important to execute well, develop, great, product offerings or service or customer focus. So the employee should work with their direct manager. It could be the vice president of the business unit or manager of the team within some department within some global business unit that is consistent with those big picture expectations of what the company would want, but also is relevant to the person's role and title, and their manager should be able to help them. But ND, no doubt that if your senior executives are not, or your CEO has not set clear OKRs, maybe one. It's pretty bad, but maybe one advice I can do for you is give them a gift of Measure What Matters, that book, or tell them about us and we can help them. Just give them some ideas and help them set their goals, because that's just not good for the company. So, but good question.
We have another question from Reed, who'd like some ideas for how you measure alignment.
Well, so and I don't know if by asking how do you measure alignment, whether it means, whether, Reed, you're asking how do you know there is alignment, or how do you actually measure it mathematically? So I can give you both answers. How do you know that there is alignment? Well, unless you have the top corporate objectives and therefore then which waterfall down or cascade down to business unit and then department and then team objectives, or maybe if you're a very small company, just company and team, or really large company, you'll have layers of teams and sub teams. So if you don't know that in the context of what they are above you, you're not going to have a very good alignment, because you're not setting objectives in a way that contextually and directionally supports and aligns to the goals above you that are important, that matter. So, but when you have a global goal for the company of expand our company globally or grow our business globally, and you're vice president of sales and you have a revenue increase goal, of course that just easily visibly aligns to the top. If you're in marketing and you're a B2B company and you have to increase the number of qualified leads for your sales team, that also aligns to the top corporate objective of growing your company globally. You can also have a goal of opening an office in Europe that aligns to the growing your company globally. Your HR team may have goals around hiring new team members that, again, not to repeat myself, but as you can see, it aligns up to the global business objective OKR of grow our company globally. So that shows you how you know that there's alignment. And I gave you only like the tip of the spear. It's like you can go so much deeper than that, but I'm just trying to make it simple. But how do you measure the actual alignment? So actually, our product does it. I didn't show you our product. This was not a product demo. But if you want to see a demo and see how goal alignment, we actually have something called goal alignment visualization. It's a chart that shows you how goals align to other goals and how progress on the goals underneath and the OKRs underneath actually has ripple effects or letters up and aligns and contributes up to the goals above them and moves the needle on the progress of those goals. It's really neat. We call it like a data-driven or algorithmic alignment, where you can see that progress bar impacted, right? Pretty neat. All right, well, Are any one last quick question, or should we start wrapping up with 3 minutes left to the hour?
Now, we do have one more question, and I think let's see if we can fit it in here, Zorian. Joe
Sure.
asks, we're a large company with many scorecard systems and varied strategic planning processes. How do OKRs and strategic planning, quote unquote, play nice?
That's a really smart question. So, without actually doing strategic planning in the first place, how the heck can you come up with your top corporate objectives, right? You don't just pull them out of thin air. They're not in vacuum. So, you have to have a strategic planning process. The fact that you have that is already a big step forward. And during a strategic planning process, you obviously come out with, what are the key strategic priorities this quarter or this year? And out of those, you tease out your top objectives. So if global growth is one of the top 3, 4, or 5 big strategic pillars for your company, then of course one of your top corporate goals will be around, growing our company globally. It's a no-brainer, very simple. So OKRs are actually the nicest way to play nice with your strategic planning process, because they make it really simple to boil down all of that complicated strategic thinking into just a couple of 3, 4, or 5 digestible, palatable, simple to remember objectives that anybody can understand and measure at any level of your company, starting at the top of your company, then cascade down to business units, departments, further cascade down to teams. So OKRs should be sort of sub-headlined as the way to play nice with your strategy. So I'm probably gonna use that, Joe. So thank you. Anyway, hopefully that helped answer the question. Anything else, or probably HCI you want to wrap up at this point, I guess.
Yeah, Zorian, I think that's great. That's a terrific set of insights for our audience today. And just before we close, I'd like to remind everyone that today's webcast has been approved for HRCI and SHRM credit. Please give us about 24 hours, and then to view your credits, visit your My HCI profile online. Hover over the drop-down menu and select My Learning Journey. We'd like to give one more thank you to Zorian, and for all of us here at HCI, thanks for listening today. We'll see you next time.